Howdy, you folks. It's Meandering Mike in the Man Cave of Madness. It's after midnight. And we are taking a look at Napoleon. This is an instructional video. It's not quite how to play, it's how to set up and important things to look at before you start playing. The reason I'm doing a sort of pre-play focus on setting up and some important notes is that I've seen a number of videos of people talking about their experiences with Napoleon where things happen and things aren't turning out quite right. Like their state of their game is getting into a place where they didn't quite follow the rules right. They missed something, their use of cards or what they did with them. Things get weird and things get astray. The state of the game gets in a weird condition, and things either happen too fast, or things that should have happened didn't, or people are making progress too far too fast in certain circumstances. So that's what this video is going to focus on things before you start to play that you want to take note of to make sure that you have a smooth play, that you get the sort of experience as intended by the designer. No, we all make mistakes, when we're learning a game and we're playing through, and that's okay. But if you can avoid some mistakes, I'm not talking about mistakes in gameplay and your decisions or bad luck. I'm thinking about, oops, I should have done certain things to follow the mechanics, or some things that don't seem like they're necessarily important rules, or that you maybe miss the importance of. So this should hopefully you avoid any of those weird situations in your games. So the first thing that I want to talk about here, we're gonna be looking at the cards and the importance of setting up properly. But I want to say a few things about the rules and the playbook. Okay, so you can sort of skim through the rules of play, and you can then look through the playbook. They've got an example play. They got some initial things that they talk about of what you should focus on at the start. You need to be very careful in that some of the things that they say, if you don't interpret right, this is going to cause some of those problems. So I'm going to point out a few of the things. Now, one of the tiny bits of confusion, it's really not that big of a deal, but it's kind of a weird thing, and my OCD requires me to mention it, is that in the playbook, they refer to rules sections in here, but they call this the OR. See, OR section 3.0 or 7 point whatever. The OR in here stands for official rules. Well, this isn't called the officials. I mean, it is the official, but this is the rules of play. And they didn't put in here that they could have said just, see the rule book, or, RB or ROP for rules of play, but they, use the initialism OR for official rule book, but that's not what it is. So if you get confused by that, you don't be, and it's kind of annoying. My OCD says it's annoying that it's that way, but it's fine. The consistency is there's a reference number in here. It's to a rule section in here, the rules of play, even though they're calling it the official rule book, which it is, but that's not what it's titled. All right. Now, in the rule book, there are certain sections that are set off that some of them are important. And this one, thank goodness, they label it as important. They put that in red, and this is critical, okay? The difference between placed and played. Now, there's only one letter difference between placed and play, but for the purpose of this game, it is critical, okay? You must understand that cards can be placed on the board, but they're not yet played. Or when you place a card in the game, it might come into play immediately, in which case it is also played. But you need to know the difference. Every card that is placed is not necessarily played. So you must look to the card and the instructions for the wording. And again, it's only one letter difference, placed and played, but you need to follow this carefully. Otherwise, you'll have things happen too early if you are playing the cards when they should just be placed. All right, we'll see an example of that a little bit later. Now, they talk a bit about the cards, and the sections that are very important to notice are this added by section and removed by section. This is very important when cards come into and out of the game via different mechanisms, and there's times when you have to check for removal that you might forget, okay? This is important to make sure that you remove cards at the appropriate time and add them at the appropriate time, but also the adding of cards must be done at a particular time during a turn. Normally, the cards are actually only added to the draw deck, okay? So I'm gonna turn over here. On the edge of the board, they have this label here for their draw deck. Normally your draw deck is sitting right here. I plan on like moving it to the middle, so I'll have it right at hand, more visible. I'll probably plop it, right here, or maybe over the top of the campaign resolution, which, you can move it aside. See, but in terms of my own play, or when I show a play, it'll be much easier than having it way over there. Now, the important part, again, and what I'm going to say it is, and I'm going to show you here this, we're talking about the card deck phase, okay? There's a remove card segment and an add card segment, okay, that are at the beginning of this card deck phase into the card action phase, okay? If you are in the middle, you can't see that because I didn't tilt back. Okay. If you're in the middle of a card action phase and you're processing cards and it says to add or remove something, when you add the card, you do not immediately actually add it to the draw deck, okay? You set it aside to be added to the draw deck in the next turn, okay? This is very important. This is talking about the flow of play, where this is going to mess you up if you don't do it right. And here's why. If in your turn you're drawing a card and it says to add a particular card or set of cards to the game, okay, and you add it right now and shuffle them in, and then you go to draw your next card, that card shouldn't be in the deck yet, but you could draw it, okay? So you're drawing it a turn earlier than it normally should. There are a few cards that say immediately put these in the deck. There's certain cards that have some important actions that you resolve, in a sequence, that if it says do that, you do that. Otherwise, the default is you do not add the cards right away, okay? So if I put it in there prematurely and then I draw a card that shouldn't be there, now something can be happening too early. And then it might say, oh, add these cards. So let's say I then put those in the deck and shuffle them in, and then I'm ready for my next, because you can have between 5 and 12 card draws per turn. So I draw the next card. And now it can be one of these new cards that I'm now drawing, and it's like 2 turns ahead of than it should have been, because that first one, I shouldn't have been able to draw it until the next turn. And then if I draw that other one, it would be, it set up some more cards the next turn. So you could potentially chain these cards in a way that by inserting them too early into the deck, shuffling them in, drawing it, getting another card, drawing it, getting another card, that you can leapfrog way ahead of the cards that should be in the deck, okay? So that is critical, this proper sequencing, that normally when you're supposed to add cards into the draw deck, that you don't actually shuffle them in yet. They're to be added, they're set up to be added in the next turn's card deck phase, where it'll say to add and draw cards, okay? So that being said, that very important play condition, we're now going to talk about setup, because this is an example of how things can go awry. And if you mess up at the very start, that's also going to compound things. So the important thing to do is, when you're getting ready to play I, Napoleon, is you need to sort all the cards. There are 3 different eras of cards. There's the Commander era, the first Consul era, and the Emperor era. Now, we can see up over here, I'm going to move this, so pardon for the move, or you don't get it seasick or something. Color-coded, kind of this burgundy with a slight hint of dusty brown. This rich, deep blue with a sort of touch of green in my eye there. It's got a greenish grayish to the blue. And then this golden brown color. Some people call it gold, some people call it yellow, some people call it's golden brownish to me. That's the Emperor period, the first Consul period, and the Commander period. Now, there's a bunch of cards that are all color-coded, all right? By the stripe, okay? So these are Commander cards. They have that reddish burgundy stripe. So I know, it says on there too, here on this card, this is one of the divider cards. There's 10 of these. Okay, this is the key. You got to sort these cards, find all the Commander cards. The best thing to do is to put them in order number to make sure you got them all, and pay attention to what it says here. So cards 1 to 34 in that set. All right. 35 to 53. And 54 to 63. All right. So those are all the Commander cards. They're in segments. Okay. Now, if you look up here, you can see an icon at 1796. That's saying we add cards. So these are the 1796 cards. They will be added in 1796. All right. This one here doesn't have a year. It says card 29 FCD. These get added into the deck when this card comes into play, or we transition into the first Consul deck. Now that's sort of odd that there's Commander cards that show up. Now the reason they're this way is that these cards, some cards will exist through time, even though they get introduced in certain eras. And this one can happen. This card 29 can come up in the Commander because it's in this deck here, because this is 1 to 34. But if we haven't got this set of cards yet, and we get to FCD, the first Consul deck, you'll still disposition these cards. Okay? Now, see the backs? This is the standard back, this blue color. So This is the color of the first Consul. Now, I wish they had actually used a different color because all the cards in all of the eras have this back if they go into the draw deck. Any cards that are this kind of beigeish, khaki kind of color here that have information, these do never go into the draw deck. You have to read here how they're dispositioned. Like, some cards will start face up, placed on the board, or face down, placed on the board. They may or may not be in play, but you got to read them at the time you set up and disposition them. Okay? Notice here it says place immediately. So that's these three cards. But you got to pay attention to which side here. So like General Bonaparte, this is you. This is Bonaparte himself, and it says place face down in the I, Napoleon box. So I, Napoleon is the big box where Napoleon, all his very proximate effects are things that affect him very directly. So during command setup, the very beginning of command setup, and it has an effect. It says you're getting +1 +1 admin per year. That's an income. You can do things with your admin points, okay? But this is how the game will start with this card on this side. There's an effect down here. It says turn face up at the end of any campaign or expedition if you have 5 or more glory. G. So you got to pay attention to this. And some of the cards on the game, you have to remember that these things are sitting out there waiting. So you could potentially, every moment of every game, read over every card that's placed on the board to see if something, you don't have to do that, right? So, this is after any campaign. One of the things you can do is like you could get some dice or something, and you could put them next to cards or on cards where you have to go back and check something, okay? So for those cards that is conditionally going to happen, you can help. You can use beads, you could use coins, you could use dice, and you can use, like, say, different color dice or different, denominations of coins to, like, when should I check? Like, this is after campaign. You have to finish a campaign or expedition. So you could use one kind of die on any card that's like, hey, I'm going to check after a campaign, right? So you could put a certain die or bead or whatever, certain color, a certain denomination of coin, I don't know, quarter for campaign quarter, as a mnemonic, something like that, to check this kind of cards. Now, so these other ones here, these are the other two cards. This goes in the strategy and tactics section, face down, and it's turned face up by Topographical Bureau. It's a card number 3. So this one you don't have to check all the time, because card 32, when it comes into play, it's going to say, oh, by the way, do this thing, flip this up, right? So this one doesn't need a constant reminder. You will get prompt when it comes. If this card never comes up, this is not going to flip over. All right. Whereas this one here, this strategy and tactics, you place it in strategy during command setup. Now, the fact that it doesn't say which side, face up or face down, it's going to be face up. There's nothing that turns it. This is available. This is available. Now, this card technically isn't played because this is a strategy and tactic thing. This is used during a campaign, right? So it's going to be there, available in strategy and tactics for you to use when a campaign comes up. Okay, so this card is going to be face up at the very start of the game. Now, I'm doing this in detail because this is at the very beginning. If you mess these up, you shouldn't be on this side. So, well, look, that's the cute side. That's Bonaparte. No, you shouldn't be getting two here. You don't become general, okay, yet until you finish your first campaign, okay? And you have 5 more glory. You have to successfully finish it. I mean, let me rephrase that. You may have earned glory for various purposes, okay? As long as at the end of a campaign you have 5 or more glory, you will be promoted to general, okay? You could have actually lost glory on a particular campaign if you had somehow got enough other glory, okay, to get to have 5 after a campaign finishes, okay? Now, it may be very, very difficult for that to happen, but that's possible. That's you just got to pay careful attention to the wording of the rules. You know, at the end of any campaign, if you have 5 or more glory, boom. Okay, so you start on this side. This one you can start face up. This one says face down. So this is, pay attention to every single aspect of setup. And any time during the game where you're going to be adding more cards to the deck, you got to find the ones. Okay, these will never go into the draw deck. They're always going to be dispositioned somewhere on the board. Okay, and these here, this was the separator card. This is going to have no effect once you've processed this. It's telling you that you have these cards that you place immediately. And make sure you have all these cards, and then you can set this aside out of the way. Okay, all these guys with this back. That's the top. They're going to all be shuffled up, and all those guys are there. Okay, that's the start of your draw deck at the beginning of the game. When 1796 comes around, okay, and you see that symbol, hey, we're adding cards. Okay, and that's cards 35 to 53. Here's these 3 cards. It says place immediately again. So they're all, those 3 cards are going to get placed. Okay, and again, what I did was I had grabbed all the cards here that are entering in 1796. I put them all in order, but I took the ones that have this kind of back. So these guys are not in order in here. I separated them. So there's my divider card. I took these 3 guys out. Okay. This is 46, 48, and 51, or is that 57? Kind of hard to read from this angle that I'm doing, okay? But there's a Syrian campaign, Joseph Fouché, or Fouché, I'm not sure how they pronounce it, the Treaty of Campo Formio, okay? These, when 1796 rolls around, you're going to disposition these cards, and this is pace and potential treaties face up. So this guy is going to be sitting in potential treaties. This says place in the Minister of Police when added in 1796. And it says a may on here. May. Now, when it says may minus something, that means spend. If you can spend, you may. You don't have to. You may spend -1 activation to reinstate flip face up during the existing card play segment, okay? So now what's weird about that is this one should have a little better thing, is that it sounds like this guy starts face down. It doesn't say that, it should. It doesn't say that it starts face up. But it's talking about being able to pay to reinstate. Now, you could interpret this as, well, he starts this way, and there's a methodology here to fire him, basically, and you put him face down, and now there's text here saying, well, how you could reinstate him. It does not say, should this guy start face up or face down, unfortunately. You could easily make a case for either way. So that's something that needs clarification. And the last one here that we want to look at, let's see, that's a potential campaign. Place in potential campaigns face up. So sometimes there is the Syrian command. Sometimes they're nice and explicit enough, and this one's not. This one should really say, it says to place it, but should it be on this side or this side? Whereas like the Napoleon card, it said we place it face down, and we knew that Napoleon himself was on this side where he's only getting 1 admin point a turn. He's not a general. He's just an officer of artillery. And he's got to get promoted. Okay, so disposition the cards, when this time period comes up, 1796, and here are these cards that go in the draw deck. Now, this is happening in the beginning of that turn, in that phase. Like there's those segments where you're adding and removing cards, okay? And so you're doing it before you're actually getting into card action. So in 1796, before you start drawing cards, these guys will be in the deck, okay? I'm trying to see. Now, there are cards that sometimes say, hey, you're going to add some other cards. But again, those don't go into play. Oops, did I get out of order? Yeah, not a big deal. You also have to look for the removal. The removal is, if a certain card comes up on 117, it should say Nelson's removed. Otherwise, Nelson stays into play. Now, this symbol here under removed is remove if you use it. Okay? It's remove it once you use it. Otherwise, when you get to the first Consul deck, the first Consul era, this card will be removed. So anytime you transitional era, you have to check to see this guy would be removed when we got to FCD. This guy would not. He'll only be removed when 117 happens. This guy will be removed at FCD, but he might be removed earlier. All right. Etc. Okay. This one comes in 796, not removed until 1814. 1813. Some cards are never removed. All right. Once they get in the deck, they can be discarded and shuffled back in, discarded, shuffled back in. Okay. Now, let me pause here a second. All right. I want to talk a little bit more about this particular set of cards, this conditional card 29 or FCD. These cards can come into play when card 29 in the commander deck is revealed, or when you transition to the first Consul deck, the first Consul era. Now, all of these cards are deck cards. Okay. This is the divider card. None of them are placed on the board, but some of these have some interesting removal effects. Now, so this one has a normal year, but it also says this is abdicate. So abdication is a special subsequence of the Emperor deck. Okay, this gets triggered at a certain time. It's a set of cards in the Emperor deck era. Okay, so if you get to 1815, this card's going to be removed. If before 1815 you enter abdication, that's going to cause this card to be removed. Okay, like I said before, some don't have any special effects for removal. Okay, now here's an example of an odd card. This may sound like, what? Notice it says it enters at 29 or FCD. It is removed at FCD. If you're putting all these cards in the deck because you didn't get card 29, you've reached FCD, technically this card gets put into play and is immediately removed. In other words, this guy only has an effect here for things that are going to trigger the FCD world. So this 29 card sets things up that this can happen, and he can then be in the deck and he can then be used. But if you get to FCD, it's sort of telling you this guy has to be dispositioned, and he's coming and going immediately. He'll never exist in the world of the game if he's triggered this way. If he enters the draw deck because of card 29, he will be removed here. But if you get to the state of we're putting all these cards into the deck because we've reached the first Consul, or the first Consul deck cards are entering, he actually doesn't enter. Okay? That's just weird, but that's what that is. There's a few of these guys, and they're all involved with this Brumaire. Now, what's Brumaire, you might ask? Is that a person? No. Brumaire, 18 Brumaire. That the there was a French revolutionary calendar that was created with new names and new. So 18 Brumaire is the what was it, November 18th of 1799, or it wasn't November 18th. I don't remember the exact date, but it's a period in 1789 where 1799, sorry, where the coup happened, the attempt, successful, hopefully in your game, of Napoleon to eliminate the directorate and take over and become first consul. Okay, so that's what Brumaire is. It's a special name for that period. It's like a named event, a named time. It's a name that existed only. That calendar was abolished shortly afterwards. But Brumaire is not a person. It's a time. It's a place. It's 18 Brumaire is when the coup happened. Okay, and so some of these guys, their effect is to do a modify on the Brumaire rule. I don't know. They should call it the Brumaire coup. You know, that in literature, and then it's referred to as 18 Brumaire or the Brumaire coup or whatnot. So the name of the card in this game is Brumaire, but I think probably should have been called the Brumaire coup. All right, so that's another one of these guys that says FCD, FCD. Okay, that's a guy that's just going to be removed after a particular card happens. Dates or a card. Okay, now, this removal from play, okay, that symbol says, you know, you removed at these times or when this card gets played. There are certain cards, and here's one, that say, if not in play, okay, this is the word. This is a trigger, EMD, so this card gets removed by that 183, the 199. Now, we're gonna say something about this part here, the remove when played, because it's kind of sort of not, but or by if you enter the Emperor deck era, you would remove this card unless it's in play. So this is the current treaty, Spain allied with France. So if this is actually in your current treaties, it's in play, and just because you transited into the Emperor stage, the Emperor deck stage, this guy would not get removed. If it was not in play, if it was in the deck, it hadn't gotten drawn yet, then you would remove it. Okay? Now, this thing saying be removed by play, you gotta read this card carefully. And this is just something that you'd experience, but I'm gonna mention this now, that sometimes you gotta read carefully the disposition of cards, because this can cause a problem sometimes in your play if you're not careful. Okay? Must place in current treaties and set Spain to allied. Cool. However, if Spain is already allied, remove this card from play and reveal a new card. Okay. So, if through normal diplomacy, and diplomacy only happens in the first Consul and Emperor eras. So if this card gets into the deck because of card 29, and you draw this card during the Commander era, okay, oops, you're not going to have done any diplomacy, okay, and therefore there's no way that Spain could already be allied, and therefore this card would actually immediately come into effect and you'd get them allied. Okay, so this second part where it get removed, if you draw this card in the Commander era, you know, it's definitely gonna come into actual play. All right, but otherwise you have to look. So it's being revealed, it's sort of coming into play, and it says remove it. Well, no, you don't remove it. If you're actually able to place it. This is a weird phrasing. You're placing the card, which is actually putting it into play, but it's a treaty that's being revealed. It doesn't do anything at the moment. It has an ongoing effect. which keeps Spain allied. But that removal thing is not the normal remove the card once played. Normally, this symbol means the cards come up, you've drawn it, you're actually using it, and it happens only once. You've used it, and it gets removed. This does not mean that. This is just saying, hey, there is a removal effect here in the quote-unquote playing of it where it actually doesn't get played. So this is kind of a backwards, this is an oddity. I don't know if they needed a different symbol or something here, but this will come into effect unless Spain is already allied, in which case you remove this card. Now, this is important to notice here. This thing we talk about revealing a new card. There's a number of different times that you reveal a new card. That if you've drawn a card and certain effects can't happen, you sometimes draw a replacement card. And when you do that, over here on this track, you don't move this up for every single card drawn. You do it for every single card that was dispositioned in such a way that it didn't require you to draw another card. Now, that's not always true. There are a few times in the deck where it says like draw. I'm not particularly looking at Polar there, where it'll say like, do another card and move the thing, count it. Okay, so sometimes you do extra cards and you count them. Sometimes you normally, if you have to draw an extra card, like ignore this one, remove it, you draw another card and you don't count the progress over here for the die roll, how many cards have been done, and stopping the drawing early. Okay, so this was sort of like a special attention here. This is a weird one. This set of cards, part of the commander overall deck that can come in during the commander based on this card. It can come in otherwise when you transition to the first Consul era. So there are commander cards that can be entering the deck when you reach besides the fact that you're going to this whole thing. When you reach FCD, you're going to disposition this whole stack here, okay? But you'll have to do this if this isn't here, and these are actually commander cards going in. These are FCD era cards. But because of this strange peculiarity, there's those two cards that we noticed that also have an FCD removal that can basically be, if this is entering because you've entered FCD, this guy basically doesn't do anything. He's just, no reason to put him in the deck and take him out. It's like, okay, we've found him. We're accounting for him. He's going to be gone. And there was also there Paul Barra. Okay, Talleyrand actually sticks around a little while until this card comes up. But there you go. So again, sort of meandering through it, but we're emphasizing the very importance of when you're setting up and or setting up a new year of card dispositions, pay very careful attention to what they say. Like, these are all going into the deck, but if we reach 29, we're shuffling all these in. But if we reached FCD, there's actually two cards in here that you actually don't put into the deck. It says that, no, don't leave those in there because you're going to remove them at the same time. We're reaching FCD. We would put all these in except those two you wouldn't. Okay, so again, you got to check additions and removals at a number of different spots as things progress. Certain years happen or certain cards get played, etc. But I'm going to repeat that issue about when something tells you to add a card, and you're in the middle of a turn, you're drawing cards, and a card effect tells you to add something to the deck. Unless it says to, do not do it. Like there's like Robespierre card that you immediately do a set of cards that you shuffle them in and you do a special, thing for Robespierre, okay? There are things like that you got to pay attention to and process immediately. Otherwise, the default is if you get a new ad for a card, set it aside near the deck, okay? Okay, and the thing is, like, it's basically you put it in the area where you're discarding cards, where you draw a card and you aren't using certain cards, where you're electing not to. Some cards get discarded. They didn't come into play. They're not removed. They're going to go back in the deck, okay? And you end up in the cleanup phase. You do that. Basically, it's really the same. It's like for the next turn, you're going to get those new cards into the deck in the next year. Whereas when we saw like the 1796, this is happening at the beginning of 1796, up early. And, you've already done like income phase and that stuff. But you're going to be dispositioning these cards. And so they will be available to draw. But cards during your card activations, as you're drawing cards and doing things, do not immediately shuffle them into the deck. They shouldn't be drawable yet. And if you do that, there's the potential for it to compound to get more and more cards that you can get way off schedule for how quickly cards get. So there's definitely some cases, I think, of people out there that have they're going to be like, whoa, this is weird. This happened this time. It's probably because you were maybe shuffling cards in too soon and got that cascading effect. So if something weird goes on, and sometimes you can just say, I see what I made a mistake, and you can sort of roll it back and undo the effect, or just move ahead and adjust somehow. But sometimes, like, wait a minute, I see something. Yeah, you just need to start over again, right? Sometimes, like, wow, this game is so off the rails. This game is so gone askew that just go ahead and start over and take note of what the problem was, and remember to, I got to make sure I don't do that. Okay. Now, I want to mention, let me see if I can find it here. So I was talking about that cleanup where you the commander, you don't have the diplomatic and domestic politics phases, but you clean up where you're resetting certain cards. Things that are in the treaties can be flipped face over and back up. You flip them all face back up. If you use Napoleon's luck, you reinstate that. You reset your diplomacy to 0, admin to 0, except, okay, so glory and politics points are an ongoing total. Diplomacy gets reset to 0. Admin gets reset, except this is something that I think a lot of people miss. In the year 1793, if you had any admin points unspent at the end, you get to carry them over for admin in 1793. All of the years, admin and diplomacy always reset, but that very first year. So this could be important. This could, where you might, normally you get that one admin point from Napoleon as a commander, not yet general, and you could earn some admin other ways. But so you could have one or more unspent admin points in 1793. Do not reset those to 0. 1793 only. All right. Covered those commander era things, the initial setup, the guys that come in 1796, there's the guys that come in conditionally on card 29, or they'll come in when you transition to FCD if they didn't come in by card 29, and the peculiarities of that. Now, there's this big stack for when you get into the first Consul era. There's normally no cards that enter midstream. So this is one big, huge stack here of guys that are shuffled in, and there's a pretty big stack of guys that you have to disposition, because if you look here, okay, this is card 64 through 110, so it's a pretty so 47 cards, right? And there's all these here that has a distribution. So like Austria, the Italy campaign, so you got to read all of these guys here. Okay, what do you do with them? Where do you put them? Okay, now here's the, Napoleon has become the first consul, okay? So some of these cards are things that are triggered effects, like this imperial plebiscite, where Napoleon, he's first consul, he can eventually transform into first consul for life, okay? So that's a possible interim step before becoming emperor, as he could be first consul for life, and there's certain things that trigger that. So again, when you're transitioning to the first consul time, okay, there's the divider card. You got to go through all these cards and figure out, where each individual card is going to end up here. Current treaties, potential treaties, first consul for, there's the first consul for life card, if it actually gets there. So you got to look at all those, make sure that you've put those in the right spots, that you read carefully where they're placed, whether some are actually in play or not. And again, there's a lot of these ones with triggered effects. Some things you got to look and see what is going to cause them. So like I mentioned before, like maybe putting a die or a bead or a coin on those things that like you got to keep looking at to see what triggers it, okay? Because if you forget those things in the course of the play, that can mess things up. Like, such and such happened, this came into play, and if you didn't trigger that there, then you can get into this weird state. Like, wait a minute, these things aren't supposed to both be in this same state at the same time. So get these guys all properly dispositioned in the right place, and then you got this big old new cards going in there, and you'll have looked at the previous deck with those commander cards and remove any of them that, say remove because of FCD. You're also checking gear removals, etc. So make sure, especially when you transition from deck to deck, that you're clean. Check basically everything. Every time you go, to first consul, then later go to the emperor deck. Check all over the place, all the cards on the board through the deck to make sure there's not things left behind, and including looking at things like, well, wait a minute, this card did come up when we forgot to remove this, something like that. Just try to make sure. You should be checking enough, but sometimes something will slip through, and hopefully it's not a major disaster. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the Emperor deck. This is even bigger. The Emperor period is long. There's 25 total turns here. It's not 25 years because that last turn here is 1817 to 1821. You got 1815, obviously that's when by Napoleon at Waterloo. But there's a guy with an 1816 turn, and then 1821 is when he actually died on St. Helena. But so there's two turns after 1815, 1816, and this long one, multiple turns. If you get that far, there's all sorts of reasons why the game can end earlier. So, huge stack of cards. These will all go in to the draw deck when you get to the Emperor phase. But there's also some other ones here. So this here is all the ones that you need to disposition. These are the ones that will never go on the draw deck. These are all ones. So you thought there was a lot for the first consul deck. No, there's even more here. So you got to go through these guys, spend the time when you get to that Emperor transition to make sure you're putting these all in the right place. Now, as you play this more, this will get, second nature. You'll know, aha, these guys are going here. These kind of treaties are showing up. This kind of effects. These certain personalities are coming in and out of play. It'll get all easier. It'll get easier. And like you might make mistakes at a time. Do your best to overcome it. If things are just like, wait, something's really, really wrong, then you might need to start over again and try to pay attention to figure out, oh, this is what I goofed up on. But so these are all the guys that don't go in the draw deck. There was that big section of guys that do go in the draw deck. And then there is, let's see here what I did. If you see here, now this is the golden emperor deck era. Okay, it says it starts at 1807. You can actually trigger things earlier, so you can actually have emperor deck cards earlier than 1807. I got cards sticking to my elbows here. Sorry, let me move that out, make sure they don't stick and then drop on the floor. So these 1807, 1809, 1810, and 1814, they're additional cards are going to get added to the Emperor deck. So this is relatively, there's only 2 cards for 1807. You got Jerome Bonaparte and Eugene de Beauharnais. Jerome was the youngest brother of Napoleon. There's Joseph and Jerome and Lucien and Louis. Okay, 2 L's and 2 J's, JJ and LL. Lucien, I don't remember exactly. Was it Lucien was the oldest or Joseph? I don't remember. But anyway, you got Lucien and Louis and Jerome and Joseph Bonaparte, the brothers. Okay. 1809 only has 1 card come into play. Marie-Louise Habsburg comes available as a potential wife. Good old Napoleonic intrigue there. Searching for the heir. 18 or 10 has 2 potential cards. Prince Schwarzenberg and Anna Pavlovna Romanov. Pavlovna, that is a patronymic in Russian. That means Anna Romanov, daughter of Pavlov. So Pavlovna means she's the daughter of Pavlov. And then the 1814, there's just 1, the Peace of Europe. And then there's this abdication. I mentioned this before. This is the abdication section here. These cards are all, a subset of the Emperor deck that comes in at a certain event trigger that's called abdication. So there's a certain card that's going to trigger the state of abdication. Okay, it's not based on a particular card. It's not based on a particular date. There are different things that can trigger abdication, and then this comes into play. Okay, so I'm going to wind back a little bit here. So you notice the importance of sorting all these cards, finding these 10 divider cards, finding all the cards within them, sort them. Okay, so all the ones that have a draw deck back, put those in order to make sure you have them all. The ones that have a card back that says you're going to place them somewhere on the board, not put them in the draw deck, put them in the order. You can check against the card. Do I have all these guys? Okay. And order them all, get them in groups, sort of like I did. Before you start, you're going to save yourself a ton of pain. Make sure all your cards are sorted. And this is the way you should put your game away. Don't just throw it in the box. When you're done, trust me, sort them, if at all possible. Just, unless your wife's going to kill you if you don't clean up the table right now. Sort everything like this so that the next time your start will be much smoother. Figure out, all right, here's the first Consul deck, the ones with these backs that go into the draw deck. You get the ones that have the backs. Do that for, obviously you need to have the commander deck at the start, right? The commander era deck, get those, but I highly, highly, highly recommend you have it all sorted at first, okay? And have those ones set aside, and then you can start playing with your commander deck, okay? And if you do that, your odds of things going astray are going to be much less. Pay attention to those, set them up, carefully paying attention. And then in your brain, remember, as you are playing and drawing cards, and if things are coming into play, don't shuffle them in right away. Okay? Set them aside near, it's like next to the normal discard pile. Set them aside there, and then that following year, they will enter play. And as you're removing things, Normally, you don't really have to remove things from the draw deck until that next year. But if you don't take them out right and you draw something, you're supposed to check, should this have already been removed? So looking at that remove section, it's like, wait a minute, this is not valid because it's removed. And you would do that. You would not count any card that you draw that should be removed. Okay, and you can set it aside, remove it, and then you would replace, with another draw, because you're supposed to draw your draw. For some reason that you can't use that card because it's out, you draw the, but don't double count. Don't push this up more than you're supposed to, unless it tells you on the cards. All right. There was one more thing I wanted to check. All right, so I wanted to mention a few things about the drawing of cards and when you replace them or not if you can't use them. So there are instances when there's a card that you draw that says that you must, which means it's mandatory. But a mandatory card can have conditions on it. And if they're not met, if you draw a mandatory card, but the conditions are met, the cost can't be paid, or there's something else that can't be fully met, you don't use the card, and you need to look at the instructions on whether you draw a replacement or not, okay? Mandatory cards you meet whatever requirements, and sometimes they can be an option like this or this, but if you can't do any of them, if you can't meet that cost of the mandatory part, it's not going to come into play, and you may or may not draw a replacement card, okay? If something is not mandatory, it uses the word like may, okay? You have that choice of playing the card if you pay the cost or meet the requisite part, or you can discard it because it's not mandatory. It's a may. You can just discard it, but you never draw a replacement. Okay, for the may cards, not the mandatories, the may, you're either using it or not. But if you're electing not to use it, you don't get a replacement. Okay. Now, there's something about Napoleon's luck here. Same thing is, there's different ways to use Napoleon's luck. If you ignore a mandatory card, if you ignore it, then you do redraw, okay? Whereas if you have a mandatory card, but you can't do it because of the requisite things can't be met, then you have to, depending on the card, redraw or not. But if you're saying, oh, I'm avoiding this mandatory card, so normally you'd only do this if the card is going to come into effect, and you'd ignore it and you draw something else instead. Okay. Now something to note: this re-rolling any one die literally means any one die roll. There's so many different things that you roll for in this game, including the advancement of, do I get to draw more cards on or must I continue? There's diplomacy and domestic politics and the results of campaigns or whether a campaign is going to come into effect or not. All those different things. You can re-roll any one of those. Now, sometimes it might be better to, re-roll a campaign. Sometimes you're like, hey, I want a certain modifier, and I can't afford to pay for a certain commander or strategy and tactics card, and you could use your one use of Napoleon's luck to pay for that. But say you use your luck for that and you get it, but then you're holy crappy, then you don't have any recourse. So you got to decide, depending on what it is. It might make more sense for you to get this freebie or to save your reroll. But if you are avoiding a mandatory with this thing here, then you do draw another card to replace it. All right. Now let me see. Okay, so a little word about the ending of the game, right? You got to pay attention because sometimes the game ends, and if you're not paying attention, the game maybe should have ended, and you kept going when you shouldn't. All right. So there is a section in here on game end and outcomes. It's going to be impossible for me to get this in a way that you can actually see that and read it, but I'll mention the things. There can be on a card that says that basically game over, like Napoleon dies, or is overthrown. Okay, that's it. Game over. Boom. There are some other conditional triggered things that can happen that aren't from a card, and that is if you are first consul or emperor, once you get to be first consul or up, if your glory ever goes back to 0, game over. So you got to keep your glory up, because if you're starting out and you're in the commander thing, you can go down. You can't go below 0. Okay, so none of those tracks up here can you go below 0. So that's like if you have a penalty and it says lose 2 and you only have 1, you go down to 0. You don't go negative. If it's paying a cost, you can't do it, right? If you're at 2 points and it says minus 3A to blah, if you don't have the 3 admin to do that thing, you can't. If you have 2 or less, you can't do it. But otherwise, you can't go negative. But once you become first consul or you're emperor and you get to 0 glory, game over, man. Game over. All right. There's also, if you lose a certain campaign, the Austria-Italy campaign, card 67. So that happens that's usually the first campaign that happens once you become first consul. They're coming to try to kick your butt. And if you lose, it's over. There's some other cards that can end the game. Louis the 18th rights, natural frontiers, or peace of Europe. And then, of course, if you get to 1817, 1821, that's the final turn there. It's going to end there. And then there's another campaign that can end the game. That's the La Patrie en danger. That's card 149, which is the defense of France. It happened in 1814, historically. If you lose that, okay, that's when abdication happens. Remember, abdication segment? That's a segment, a portion of the emperor deck era. You resolve that. You go to the rulebook section 13.1 and you follow that, and those cards that were here somewhere. I've sort of lost. I've mixed things up. It was the bottom of this deck here. Okay, so there's abdication cards in here, and you process those, and that potentially can you can get does it end? Do you end up on Elba? And do you escape? Do you end up having the Waterloo campaign? If you win Waterloo, there's still another campaign that's well, you may have defeated the British and the Prussians, but you now have to face the Austrians and the Russians. Good luck. So those are the different ways to end. Make sure you're paying attention. So most of those are triggered off of cards. Something's going to happen. They'll tell you it's game over. The thing is that La Patrie en danger, you have abdication and the 0 glory. You got to pay attention. If you ever get to 0 glory, first consul or emperor, no, 0, that's it, game over. All right. And then you do your point thing, look at your glory, see how bad or good it was, figure out, how did you rate? How did you stack up? How good was your game? And there's enough interesting fates and randomness in the game. Sometimes you're going to do really good and do better than historical, and other times you're going to just die miserably early on. So that's part of the fun of the game and part of the replayability and all that stuff. So I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. And again, the most important things is get these cards all sorted. Pay very careful attention to when you're setting up. Make sure the right cards get in the draw deck, the cards that go on the board that are placed, checking their disposition of face up or face down. Don't assume that you play or do the effects of the card You got to check the difference between placed and played. If it's only placed, it's going to be there, and the effects will come at the appropriate time. I highly recommend for anything that's got a conditional triggering type effect to put some kind of marker, some way to help you remember to check it regularly or at a certain time. So whether it's color-coded marker or coins or beads or dice or something like that. Highly recommend for that. Definitely remember when things tell you to add cards to the draw deck, do not add them immediately unless it says so. You put them there at the side, you wait until the next year, that add card segment. I think this is probably one of the cases where I think people have got off the track by adding too soon, potentially that happening multiple cascading times in a turn, and boom, you can have some weird stuff happen that just there's no way it should have happened, that quickly year-wise. So hope you enjoy your plays of I, Napoleon, and not sure how soon I'll get play content on the channel. A little announcement. I am taking a game design course on card game design, and it's going to be for like about 7-8 weeks, twice a week. So my channel time is going to be probably cut in half. I'll try to get a minimum of one video out a week, but sometimes that might be, well, if it's just, I'm not going to do a channel update if I didn't do any other videos, but I might do a signal boost type video still, or I'll have some other video, but I'll just have to, the next 8 weeks, the focus has to be on the course and making progress on that and doing that. So that's just to let you all know that. So all you good folks out there, just take care and take care of your games, take care of your cards, take care of the piles, get them sorted in the right order and disposition them correctly, and they'll take care of you. And hopefully good old Napoleon you'll treat him well and he'll treat you well. So, ciao, y'all.